Hi, this is Paul, and this is a brief tutorial on how to use the BCC Looper and BCC Posterize Time filters. Here you can see an example of Looper, the guy punching through the board over and over again, or an example of the Posterize Time, like this montage-inspired effect of the girl beating up the punching bag, or later, of a flash photo insert effect. So two different effects. These two are from the BCC Posterize Time, and these two are from Looper. And Looper in no connection with the Bruce Willis movie, for that matter. Alright, so how were these done? Well, these are both very easy to use effects, and I'll show you how to do that right now. So let's start with the guy punching through the board. This is the original footage. So he gets ready, focuses chi, and yah! Right through the board. Alright, so let's make him do that over and over again. So I'm going to apply Looper directly to the clip to start. So you can see what happens at default settings. Scrub through. So you can see it repeats the first second of footage over and over again. So hence the name Looper. Here are the effect controls. If you want the loop to start on a later frame, you can change the start frame parameter here. So maybe when he's about to punch. Now if I scrub through, that's the part that gets looped. That's kind of a long loop, so maybe I want it to be shorter. Then I change the loop length, maybe to 10 frames. And now he's not even reaching the board. So he's getting ready, but he's not about to punch. So if I want my loop to be moving forward through the video, I can change the increment parameter. So let's say I increase this by 3. That means every time the clip loops, it'll start 3 frames later. So now, if I scrub through, he actually gets close enough to punch the board. Another thing you can change is that if you think the sharp cut to the next loop is too jarring, you can add a fade or crossfade transition between the frames. So maybe just a short one here of 2 frames. And now as I scrub through, it's a little bit smoother. You could go for a more artistic effect and make the overlap even longer than your loop length or increment. Kind of a ghosting effect there. But what I'm really going to do is a very short overlap of 0.5 frames. So kind of felt not seen fade, which is what I want. Okay, now we are hitting a problem here. When the clip finishes, so does the effect. Where using time effects, sometimes you want to go longer than your clip duration. So one way you can get around that is by applying Looper as a filler. So I applied it to this empty track above my video, but it still takes the first below as the source for the effect. So now you can see I can loop this guy doing that for the whole timeline. So that's one way you can use this filter as a filler. Just trim this up. And check this out. Wherever the filler cuts over the video is when the loop starts. So that's precisely when I want the loop to start. And to replicate the effect you saw earlier, I just keyframed the loop length. So what we're going to do is do the same thing here. We're going to add a keyframe at the beginning of almost 0, or 1, and then later add a loop length of maybe 4. And then add another keyframe, bring it back to 1. And so, so something happens, we have to add an increment here, and I think 1 will be good there too. So now if I scrub through, there we go. We have that sort of stuttering through the board effect like I wanted. And that is how I created the effect that you saw earlier. A couple of things to point out here. The relationship between loop length and increment is not arbitrary. So if I restore everything here, let's say you have a loop length of 5, but an increment of 10. Well, because your increment is longer than your loop length, you'll get the effect of skipping forward through your video if you do that. You can see how quickly he reaches the end there. And if your loop length and increment are the same value, you won't see any loop at all. So keep that in mind when you're setting up your effects. Now let's say you don't want him to stutter, but you want him to repeat the motion, like the other effect I did. Well, check this out. I'm going to go to default settings. You can change the loop mode as well. So instead of just normal, you can have it go back and forth. So this will have the guy repeat and go in reverse. So it's a very useful method for looping your footage. It makes it look more seamless. And if you want, you can still use the increment function here. Actually, it looks pretty cool if you do. So it's a little bit more random, and you could animate that as well to create other cool effects. Okay, but that's a quick introduction to the BCC Looper. Now let's look at Posterize Time. So here we have the woman beating up the punching bag. Posterize Time, just a couple filters down in the time category. So default settings, it doesn't look like it does much, but it actually is. Posterize Time is set at a default of 2 frame separation. So it cuts your frame rate in half effectively by doing that. Let's say we want a new frame every 24 frames. So I increase the frame separation to 24, and now if I scrub through, it's like a slideshow. And you can set this to up to like a 60 or something like that. You get longer holding on each frame if you do so. And there are other ways to control how these frames progress. So let's go back to about 1 frame a second. But check this out. If I change the time width to 50, then it's only going to hold for 12 of those frames and then resume the video. So that gives you a cool kind of stuttering action effect. Could be very useful for background of title or bullet point sequences. You can also change the time fall off, which will do a fade between the still frames and the non-still frames. Kind of like we saw with the looper. And adjusting the balance between these two, let's say you bring the time width down to 0 and the fall off way up, you will get a constant blending of frames every second. Kind of a cool effect there. And if you increase or decrease the frame separation, put it to 12, get even more of it. Okay, so how did I do that first effect? Well, it was really easy. I'm just going to reset everything. I started with a very high frame separation of 36, added a keyframe to that value, and then added a keyframe later with frame separation 1. So that took care of the speeding up part of the effect. And the frame blending, I already mentioned, I did with the time width. So just bring that down and bring up the fall off. And you can also change the way it dissolves. So if I just actually do dissolve, you can see that going through there. So that is how I set up the first effect you saw. And the second one with the photo flash was done changing the blend mode. So again, put the frame separation to about 24, change the apply mode to add, so that way the frozen frame is just composited on top of the background. So here you can see it's there the whole time, it makes everything permanently bright. So if we again change the time fall off and lower the time width, it's more of a flash. And the shorter that is, and the shorter this is, the more of a photography flash it'll feel like. And if you want to see more of her, just decrease the frame separation. Or, to go a little differently, bring it down but increase the fall off, be like a strobe effect. And there you have it, a quick introduction to the BCC Looper and Posterize Time Filters, available in Boris Continuum Complete and Avid. If you want to try this out for yourself, you can download a free trial version at our website at borisfx.com.